I have a special treat for you guys today. You've heard of gua sha for the face, to help with wrinkles, anti-aging, facial musculature, all that good stuff. Today we're going to do something similar for the pelvic floor. We're going to talk about pelvic floor empowerment. And today on the Girlfriend Doctor Show, I have a guest who's been a longtime friend, and she's an expert in pelvic floor health and really feminine, energetic empowerment. Through her own journey with significant pelvic pain, she has overcome and accomplished and has taught millions of women how to empower and strengthen their pelvic floor. And this is so critical at any stage of our life. Want to introduce you to Jana Danielson. Welcome. Welcome
Thanks
to the
for having
me. Well, I am so excited to have you here and to be in person and to be talking about one of my favorite topics, the pelvis. The pelvis.
Yeah.
But you had your own struggle with pelvic floor pain. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I did. And what was, maybe not unique, but interesting was that my story was at 21 years old, right? And so I was actually on 11 different medications at that time in my life for what started as digestive issues. I was firstborn, A-type personality. My dad had a roll of Tums antacids from, within an arm's length of him all the time as a farmer. And it just got chalked up to me being like my dad. And this burning sensation in my stomach started with one prescription and another prescription at 17 years old. And by the time I was 21, I was so good at living a double life. Because oftentimes, if you have a broken arm, people can see the cast, right? But there's so many situations or experiences we have that are invisible.
Right.
So my pain was internal, but outside, I still knew how to play Jana, or the role of Jana.
Vibrantly healthy,
yes, exactly.
And energetic and on it.
And inside, I felt like I was dying.
Ugh.
And so by 21 years old, I was on 11 different medications, and some medications were to counteract, the side effects of the ones higher up on the list. And my digestive pain turned into joint inflammation. It turned into chronic headaches. I was 21, but I felt like I was 91. And one of the pieces of that pain puzzle for me was pelvic floor pain and incontinence. And I didn't understand. I believed that unless you just had a baby or were in menopause, you didn't have to worry about anything like that, right? And those were just part of being a woman. Eventually, we would all cough and pee our pants a little bit, but oh well, right? That's what we were told. And little did I know that the seed that was being planted was one that was going to turn into my passion and purpose, because as I sat across the desk from my doctor that fateful day where she said to me, Jana, your medical team believes that the pain is in your head and that you're seeking attention. Have a nice life. Those were the three parts. I still get goosebumps when I share that story. And gaslighting was not a term, 30 years ago. I actually believed her. And I started to question, maybe I am seeking attention. Maybe I am making this up. I was newly engaged. I wondered if I should even go through with the wedding, because why would I give the man of my dreams a wife that was like a jail sentence? Would I even be able to have kids? I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I don't use this word a lot, but I hated my body. I would look in the mirror and I hated everything about what I saw. And the interesting thing was, I think back to my life, and those 11 bottles of medication were on my nightstand. So what do you think was happening to my emotionality and energetics when the last thing I saw before I went to bed was 11 prescription bottles, and the first thing I saw in the morning was 11 prescription bottles? I was essentially creating my misery until I found Pilates, and it completely changed my life.
So from these 11 bottles, right, we think, okay, the side effects, the consequences, no two of those medications likely were ever studied in any individual, let alone a woman. And you're feeling like, okay, I need external help to help this internal physical condition. And then through finding Pilates, you realize, no, wait, internally, I'm very, very powerful. Like, I can fix my body. Wow. So I want to talk about that journey, that transition, that being able to change your mindset around that.
Well, and that was huge. And so the moment for me was in line at the grocery store. I saw Madonna on the cover of a fitness magazine. The word Pilates was, that was one of the headlines. And I was like, what is pilots? So I just subconsciously put the magazine in my grocery cart and away I went. And when I got home and read the article, I read it probably 10 or 12 times. And it was like there were words jumping off the page. And then the following Tuesday, I went to my first class. And I was teaching fitness to pay for, I was in business school, so I was paying for my tuition through teaching step classes and spin classes. And so and it was very athletic as a kid. So I walked into this class, surveyed the clientele, and made the assumption there that I was going to kick ass and take names, right? So what did I do? I went right to the front center. And Anna, within about 30 seconds, I realized that I was like a fish out of water. The people around me were breathing in a way that sounded like a symphony. And I was like this flute in a grade 5 band that I was like, what the hell? I can't even breathe. Doesn't everyone know how to breathe? And my instructor approached me at the end of the class because she could tell. And she wrapped her arms around me and I just broke down. And all she said to me was, come back on Thursday. And so 4 months after my first Pilates class, I was off all 11 medications. Had no idea how breathing, alignment, this simple movement that you would watch and you would think, how is that even a workout? This movement was my medicine. And I became so curious as to what magic was in this movement and how could I, as a business student, take this out to other women who were like me that were falling through the cracks. And that was the spark for me shifted everything.
That's amazing. And when you think about it too, and you think of Pilates, and when you think about deep fascial work or body work, and you hit on a scar tissue or you hit an area of the fascia or the muscle, and all of a sudden there's an emotional release. There's an emotional breath that comes through that gives it air and life and permission to release the contraction that it's had on your body. And when you think about the pain you were having from the digestive pain, the physical pain that results, I think physiologically, so a lot of cortisol, a lot of contracture, a lot of acidity, a lot of breaking down and holding on to. So when you go through, as you were going through this discovery process, and that quickly, okay, to not taking this medication, how did you navigate that?
It was, when I was at my highest pain threshold, I literally was bound by those medications. I would watch the clock, this one gets taken at this time, this one gets taken at this time. And because I was so regimented and structured, that my brain made me believe that if I was 10 minutes after when I should have taken it, that there would be pain. And I can remember being a master's, I was doing my MBA, and I remember laying on my desk and laying my belly button was kind of on the edge of the desk, and I would pull the desk into me and just breathe when my pain would escalate. And all of a sudden I started noticing, 2 and 3 weeks into my Pilates experience, that, oh my, it's 12:30. Why is my pain not, where's the trigger of the pain? And so then I started thinking, well, what if I was an experiment? And what would happen if I only took this one medication half as much? Or what if I delayed this one by 2 hours? And the next 4 months literally was that. What if, until I found myself off of all of those medications.
And in the meantime, you're doing the breath work with Pilates. How often were you doing it?
Twice a week. That's thing.
It?
2 mat classes on a Tuesday and a Thursday night.
Pilates.
And and that's that, right? And you mentioned it. When I was doing the diaphragmatic breathing, not only was I taking in 600% more oxygen, so when we breathe diaphragmatically, that's what we're doing. I'm also nurturing my parasympathetic nervous system. And I didn't know all of this, right? So my
vagus nerve, parasympathetic,
my fight, flight, freeze was like, oh wait, we don't have to be on call 24/7. You mean we don't have to be alerting for all this pain? And then, of course, aligning. The body is meant to be. Joseph Pilates, one of my favorite quotes from him is, breath is the first and the last act of life. And somewhere in the middle, we forget how to do it. We forget how to execute. And so I had taken on, unbeknownst to me, this protective posture. I was hollowed out chest, so tight, short pec muscles, weak back muscles. As soon as I started aligning my body and being in like that power, that women's empowerment pose where I allowed my heart to open energetically, I found my voice again, my heart reconnected, and I was on this path that I just was like, how don't more women know about this? And so that, that was the real impetus that movement is medicine.
Movement is medicine.
Yeah.
And then also in the work that you teach now, and you've created products and programs and to help women, but we think about like the pelvic floor. So I always love bringing up the pelvic floor model because we're sitting a tremendous amount of pressure on it each day. And what's not visualized here is the fascia, right? And when we breathe deep, we can feel that in our pelvic floor. When we relax deep, we can do that in our pelvic floor. And when you teach some of these exercises, the pelvic floor awakening exercises, let's say, what we are, you're moving that air, you're moving the lymphatics, you're moving the circulation, you're releasing tension, and with that sometimes held emotion.
Yes.
You can feel, are there certain emotions too that are really tied to a tight pelvic floor?
And when you think about the area, so where the pelvic floor is, we have our chakra systems, our energy systems, and so the sacral chakra essentially is the real estate, right, of where the pelvic floor is. And so the sacral chakra is all about creativity and sensuality. It's orange in color. And what a lot of people don't realize is the chakras are two-directional energy centers. So there's like a funnel of energy that goes forward and a funnel energy that goes backwards at the back of the body. And so a lot of trauma and guilt and shame is held there, sometimes very subconsciously. And so when we get the movement prescription to just do Kegels, right? We cough or sneeze and leak a little bit. We just assume that the musculature is weak.
Right.
So we do Kegels, and in the majority of women, that's actually not the situation they're dealing with. They're already dealing with what's called a hypertonic pelvic floor. So the musculature is already too tight. And the reason there's some leaking when you cough, sneeze, or laugh, or go for a run, is that think about that taut muscular fiber. You cough, sneeze, or laugh, there's this extra intra-abdominal pressure going in a downward direction. That muscle is already holding on for dear life. And then we put this bang of extra pressure, it's going to release, right? So we are going to leak. So it's somewhat counterintuitive to what we've been taught, right? Because we'll just think as women like...
We need to strengthen, especially as we get older. But there's a combination of both. So first with relaxation, to really work on that relaxation piece, and then to work on strengthening.
Well, yeah, and for most women, because they are so hypertonic, even the concept of relaxing, like what does that even feel like? I mean, you can say the word, but what does that even feel like? A friend of mine actually, we'll talk about the Cooch Ball in a bit, but she started using the Cooch Ball, and she messaged me, and she's like, I didn't realize that when I go pee, I'm supposed to sit on the toilet, and within a few seconds, the flow of urine is supposed to flow. She said, for me, it would sometimes be 30 seconds before I could actually release the musculature for the urine, to empty. And so that was her big aha, was that, wait a minute, I am holding on for dear life. And it's not the fact that I should be doing more Kegels because I'm coughing and leaking. It's I need to learn the balance of the relaxation phase of the muscle. And that goes for any muscle. Our bicep needs to know when to work and when to relax, right? Our quads need to know when to relax and when to work. It's the same thing with these 14 muscles that make up the pelvic floor.
So let's talk about that. What are some exercises we can do to relax that? How do we use, our breath to relax the pelvic floor muscles? And like Pilates for the pelvic floor? Is that what we call it?
Yeah, exactly.
Pilates for the pelvic floor, or gua sha for the pelvic floor too, to release that fascia, release that tension, and then you build stronger, healthier muscles.
Exactly. And a functional muscle can do both rest and work. All right. So the first thing that I like to mention to women is that The pelvic floor literally is part of our core. So when we think about the term,
core meaning abdomen.
well, but more than that.
Okay.
So let's chat about that. So when you think about the phase, I want to strengthen my core. Most women will think I got to do planks or I got to do crunches, right? But it's so much more than that. So our core, I like to use a visualization of an apple. All right. So you have the bottom of the apple, the top of the apple, and then you have the fruit around this, the cylinder, basically. So our diaphragm, which is our main muscle of respiration, it sits here like a dome, an open umbrella, or a mushroom cap, let's say. It is our main muscle of respiration. However, we were given secondary breathing muscles in our neck, our scalenes and our sternocleidomastoids. So as young women in our teenage years, we are taught or told,
hold in your belly,
suck your belly in, but yet we still need to breathe. So our diaphragm shuts off and these little neck muscles become the main breathers. So I call my women my little goldfish, right? Because we start breathing with these gills. The problem with that is these muscles already have a job. They're like little strips of beef jerky. They're meant to hold up our head. They're meant to give us presence. And now we're asking them to breathe. That's a big job. So we get a lot of neck tension, jaw tension, we get upper neck tension, headaches, right? We start to get this forward head posture. It cuts off circulation to our face. Basically, we age, we look older than we should, right? All of this is like a kind of like a snowball rolling downhill. So when we start to learn how to breathe,
and it's a lot of shoulder breathing, right?
Well,
like you look like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exact, and that's a telltale sign. Is when you'll ask someone to take a deep breath. And they'll do that. They elevate their shoulders. So when you breathe diaphragmatically, simply by putting one hand on your belly button and one hand on this flat bone called your sternum, when you breathe in through your nose, think of filling up the circumference of your waistband. Really breathing in to your bottom hand. And on the exhale, it's that HA sound, and it's like the circumference of your waist is narrowing. So it's this expansion and contraction. That's how you know you are belly breathing. Watch a newborn baby breathe, right? What does their belly do? Rise and falls with every breath. So again, 600% more oxygen, tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system. And because the diaphragm essentially is the upstairs neighbor to the pelvic floor watches for cues. So when we're not using our diaphragm to breathe and we're using our beef jerky neck muscles, the pelvic floor thinks, well, she's on a vacation. I also am going to be on a vacation. So the teacher is sleeping, so the student also falls asleep. As soon as you start to breathe, this is the first thing I tell my women, is if you start to breathe diaphragmatically, you're going to wake your pelvic floor up. It's like CPR for your pelvic floor. So what happens when you breathe in through your nose, your lungs fill with air. The diaphragm has to essentially sink down to get out of the way. I just told you the pelvic floor follows the diaphragm. So as the diaphragm descends, the pelvic floor will be at rest. All right, on the inhale. As we exhale, the lungs empty, the diaphragm comes back into its umbrella or mushroom cap shape, and the pelvic floor will follow. Lifts. It contracts, it lifts. So when you are picking up, a baby in a bucket seat, picking up bags of groceries, at the gym working out, when you exhale on the exertion phase of whatever movement you're doing, that pelvic floor now gets to support. It gets to support the pelvic organs. Your core will turn on to, support the spine. So we now have the top of the apple and the bottom of the apple. The circumference of the apple are the 4 abdominal muscles. The 6-pack or the rectus abdominis that lives just outside of, or just inside the muscle, or the skin, sorry.
Front.
Exactly. Then the obliques act like a little X, right? A sling system essentially. So twisting, side bending. But the queen, the magical queen of the abdominals is the transverse abdominis. Starts in our low back, wraps to the front. It's our internal corset. We don't need the waist trainers. We don't, because we have one built in. And when the pelvic floor is working and the transverse abs, and that's why the cue I give is breathe into the circumference of your waistband and then exhale away from it. We're trying to get that queen of the abdominals to do her job. When we do that and we use our abdominals that way, I'll tell you, you're going to notice your physique change simply from that, because your posture is going to improve, right? And that is the one first step to waking up the pelvic floor, to becoming more functional. Whether you have hypotone, lack of tone, or hypertone, breath is always number one.
That's amazing. And I love the concept of the transverse abdominis is our waistband.
Yes.
It's really our,
Yes.
going to create that hourglass and keep that
Exactly.
hourglass there. So what are some, so breathing is number one exercise for the core,
Yes.
and also for retraining the pelvis.
Yes.
And to remember to continually breathe, like not hold our breath, and
No.
especially during workouts. And like whether it, whatever type of exercise, we can actually hold our breath and cause more pressure on the abdominal floor. So what are some things like while we're working out, focusing on breathing technique to make sure that we're supporting and, and optimizing our pelvic floor versus putting additional pressure, weakening, or creating contractions?
So you might think this is silly to talk about the feet when we're talking about the pelvic floor, but our feet are essentially like the stage of our life. We perform on that stage every single day. So each foot has 26 bones, small little bones, and at the back of the foot there's a big heavy bone called the calcaneus, our heel bone. So you don't need to be like a structural engineer to know that big solid bones are meant for weight bearing. Small little bones like in our hands and our spine are meant for movement. Most women, and especially because of our footwear, even a running shoe, but let alone any sort of a shoe with a heel, we move our weight forward. So optimally in our feet, we should have about 60% of our weight in our heel bone, 40% across the widest part of the foot where the toes connect into the main part of the foot, our metatarsals, all right? When we have that triangular weight distribution, our pelvic floor is supported. When we are just a little, and most women will be 80% forward, 20% back. So what does that do? It turns on our quads all day long. Our glutes and our hamstrings don't have to work much. And it puts our pelvic floor, it compromises that beautiful hammock. Because everything is forward, right? And then we wonder why we have back pain, or which turns into sciatica, like all of these things. And again, we're told that it's part of aging. No, it's actually not. It's not a rite of passage. It is an outcome of poor mechanics. That's as simple as it is. So when you understand that 60-40, your transverse abs will turn on. So you'll actually, when you're in line at the grocery store, you're going to be doing an ab workout because you have your weight properly distributed. You're supporting your pelvic floor in a beautiful way. And so, I want women to know that it's not challenging. It's not complicated. It's actually so simple. And the reason I know that women think it's complicated is if we look at the incontinence product industry, it's approaching a $20 billion industry. So those incontinence pads that so many of us are told are the solution are actually not, right? And yes, to stop embarrassment, and for sure. However,
there's a solution.
There is a solution.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that too. When you talk about the floor, the feet, and thinking about that in osteopathic medicine, we learn, very much neuroanatomy and connection to the fascia. But the pudendal nerve, S2, 3, and 4, innervate the feet. So a question when I have a client with incontinence, I'm like, okay, let me see your feet.
Yes.
Can you spread your toes, right? If you can't spread your toes, it's like there's a nerve problem, right? There's a stricture, there's a contracture, and like I can fix your incontinence by fixing your nerve and your flexibility and your opening.
Absolutely.
So what are some exercises that we can do, and how do we use, like you've developed these products, and I like to say, we said, okay, gua sha for the pelvic floor. So what gua sha is. You guys are seeing these ads and advertisements with the jade stone and working on lymphatics and everything. And Jana was telling me, she had showed me her gua sha, but it got broken during her transport. So we were going to show you with the gua sha, but we've got something even better, because what you've developed for the pelvic floor, can do everywhere. But why this is important, why gua sha works, and why this stretching, the fascial component. I would say fascia is like the Cinderella of medicine, because it's so underrated, and it is critical for everything we do. Every part of us is connected by fascia. One part is connected to the other, like you're talking about the neck muscles, breathing, the feet, it's all connected. So being able to optimize you know, to being able to optimize and understand, especially when it comes to the pelvic floor, because we don't want to suffer with incontinence. No. I had 4 big babies. You've had 3 babies. I mean, I had incontinence in my 30s and early 40s. I don't have incontinence anymore. And it's these types of tools and techniques that we can use that really helps us, that pelvic empowerment. That's what we want.
Yeah, and you know, shifting our mindset from the body being pieces to systems is a huge, like that, we start to see our body through a different set of lenses, right? We're not potato head dolls, right? That we put our big red lips on, you know, on Friday nights, or, you know, our strong arms when we go to the gym. We are not pieces, but yet we treat our body like that. Or we treat, wherever the pain is, we go to the pain, not realizing that the root could be somewhere else, right? And so let's talk about the Cooch Ball. So the Cooch Ball essentially is the little sister to the Cooch Ball, which I created for the pelvic floor. Now, the biggest kind of concept that I think we miss when it comes to pelvic floor or any kind of muscular health is that nutrient-rich, oxygen-rich blood is nutrition for our muscles. And when there is a lack of that, it's kind of like a desert. And for most women, we are lacking blood flow in the pelvic floor musculature. And so even when we do our Kegels, or maybe you go to a med spa and you're doing the Emsala, you know, the chair that you sit on that creates the pelvic floor contractions, wherever you fall on that spectrum, I always feel like if we don't have the environment for change, the change may not be optimized or amplified, or it might never be fully realized. So when we create the environment for change, now we're talking. So I created, the Cooch Ball was birthed first. And then when I realized, like you just said, the feet, the tension through our face, it's all tied into our pelvic floor. So the Cooch Ball is what I created specifically for that. And so, you know, making sure that I had a texture to this product that didn't trigger sympathetic, because too hard, like a lacrosse ball, way too hard. All right. A tennis ball, not as impactful, but a better choice. And so this is kind of like the 3 bears. The porridge is just right with this one when it comes to the nervous system. So even like rolling out your feet, just rolling them on the ball.
Just putting your feet on here and just rolling like you would do stones.
Yeah, exactly. This, I call it the gum chewing muscle, the masseter. There's so much tension through here. So even just laying or putting the ball between the wall and this little muscle will start, there's trigger points through here. Yeah. Well, you can even just feel how it, and fascia when unhealthy is like cotton balls or dust bunnies. Okay. Fascia should be like this beautiful silk webbing when it's healthy, when it is properly hydrated.
Like a strong spider web, right?
Strong
like
spider web.
Very strong spider web.
But it can become, because of our lack of hydration, over caffeination, our posture, it doesn't move. It's not dynamic.
It becomes strictured, right? It becomes constricted, strictured, tight, taut, and that causes all kinds of breaks, prolapse. You know, and I had a patient the other day, I was teaching another physician to do a G-spot injection. We were using PRP into the G-spot in the vagina to enhance orgasm self-pleasure. And so I was training her, so she brought in a client and who was 65 years old. She'd had a hysterectomy 20 years ago and a breast cancer diagnosis, chemo and radiation 10 years ago. And she works in a doctor's office, but she was never offered any vaginal hormone therapy, any type of hormone therapy. And anyway, she was like, okay, you know, sign me up for the G-spot injection. So the doctor, you know, as I'm evaluating this patient too, she's like, well, I think, and I have pressure down there. She had a grade 3+ prolapse of the posterior vaginal wall. So that's a rectal prolapse. She had a significant anterior prolapse too. So when they did the hysterectomy, and again, this is fascia that's broken, that's weakened, that's detached, that's disconnected, and is a poor surgical candidate because there's no hormonal effect on the vaginal floor. So I'm like, okay, well, this is a good thing we're doing PRP right now. So I inject PRP into the G-spot. And so that's platelet-rich plasma. We do that a lot in regenerative medicine in different areas, joints, etc. And it's for sexual pleasure that can help with the vagina. But we've, you know, right away I've got her on Julva for re-strengthening the pelvic floor and getting good mucosa and good vaginal pH, and help support the microbiome, doing some vaginal probiotics. And also we need to strengthen the pelvic floor. I mean, there's like already a disconnect, right? There's a break, but I can't operate on that because there's not good tissue or muscle to repair until I get that. So how does this come in, this pelvic floor strengthening exercises? Because what do I know to do? I know certainly, the pelvic floor exercises that we can do, but we really want to prevent this from happening again and strengthen what is left so that it can be repaired. And maybe she won't even need to have it repaired when we do all this.
Well, what's really...
and she's only 63 years old. Only 63.
Yeah. So she, like, lots of sensuality and life left to enjoy, right? So the pelvic floor has 3 teammates. All right. We call them the co-recruiters. So the adductors are the inner thigh muscles. Those transverse abs that I talked about, the deepest abdominal muscle, and then the glute medius. So these 3 muscles as teammates or co-recruiters of the pelvic floor are really important in movement. So I did some work with a urogynecologist, Dr. Bruce Crawford, and he has this technology called the Vessi. And when I used to own my Pilates studio and clinic up in Canada, we had the Vessi system. So we would hook these wireless electrodes basically to the perineum, the transverse abs, the adductors, and the glute med. And we would take women through a series of exercises because what we were looking for was the co-contraction of the abdominals with the glute med, with the adductors, while the pelvic floor was doing its contraction. And really helping women see...
So all would contract at the same time.
Exactly. We would look for a picket fence. And so if someone was doing a classic squat, right, because in Dr. Crawford's research, the squat and the lunge were the top 2 exercises for pelvic floor fitness, and then 8 exercises from the Pilates mat repertoire rounded out the top 10. So we would take these women through these exercises, basic ones like the squat, the lunge, the Pilates clamshell. We would do Pilates hovering, butterfly.
What's a butterfly?
So the butterfly, so we're laying on our back, basically, and you can have either your knees are bent, your ankles are on a chair, and you're basically, it's like a backline clamshell. And hey, you know what? I just had a thought. We're going to make an invitation at the end of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a bonus video for your community, and I'm going to do a video that includes those top 10 exercises.
Excellent.
For strengthening. That's what I'm going to add to that bundle. So when you're doing the squat, let's say as an example, so you're squatting down and standing back up and squatting down and standing back up, but where you inhale and where you exhale, if you're doing pelvic floor rehab or prehab, it's really important, right? So doing a sideline clamshell. So you're laying on your side, your legs are in a bent position, and the top leg is opening and closing. That is really another great exercise.
Adductors and glute med.
And if people have, balance issues or, side, you can do it in your bed before you go to sleep or first thing in the morning, lifting and lowering. So these are some of those little gems, those aha moments that I think a lot of women can become very inspired by when you realize that it is simple. Like 3 minutes a day is what we talk about for starting to improve the function of that part of your body.
Just 3 minutes a day. That's it. All right. That's amazing. I want to know so much more. You talked about we're going to do an offer. So at drjana.com/pelvic floor, Jana's offering you guys master classes, information, a bundle. Talk about that.
Yeah. So
because there's so much, like you can see, there's so much information here that you want to start incorporating it into our lives. And you were saying it doesn't take much time.
No.
3 minutes a day, and with the Cooch Ball and the Cooch Ball too, it's
exactly
like these things just habit stack, incorporate it into your day.
Think of this podcast episode like the Costco sampler. When you have your card at Costco and you like taste the sweet potato cracker and you're like, and then you walk out of Costco with the 10-pound bag of sweet potato crackers.
Oh my gosh.
This is like the Costco sampler. So if you have curiosity or you're intrigued by what we're talking about, the bundle, the pelvic floor empowerment bundle, we're calling it, has the Scooch Ball and the Cooch Ball. So you're going to get these tools. You're going to get the PFF system, which is the pelvic fix and fit system, because there's ways to optimize this, okay? Like how to feel your ball is important. How to sit on your ball is important. How to breathe on your ball is important. So the PFF system will give you the confidence.
So we didn't even talk about this, but like the Cooch Ball is like sitting, you're sitting on it and you're relaxing.
Yeah.
You're working to relax. So again, not hard.
Yeah. So even when you're on...
But it can be very hard initially.
Well, yeah. Well, and you know what? Let me just quickly say. So there is something that I lovingly call the ouch factor. So when you sit on this ball, the only rule is that your breath is your guide. As long as you're breathing diaphragmatically in through your nose, out through your mouth, you're not going to trigger the sympathetic nervous system, even though there might be like this yowza going on as you're sitting on it. The ouch factor is inversely related to the health of the tissues of the pelvic floor, meaning high ouch factor, low health. Right? As soon as we get more blood flow, the ouch factor starts to decrease as the health of the pelvic floor increases.
And as we get more blood flow, we have better orgasms.
Yes.
That's like bottom line here, right? And that gives us more oxytocin. So everything we can do, and there's no time limit. Like this is for the rest of our lives, where there are, we're in our 20s or 30s through our 70s, 80s, 90s, 100, I don't know.
Absolutely.
But like we want to keep that healthy pelvic floor as long as possible for multiple reasons. So pelvic floor empowerment.
Yeah. And so you're going to get that. You're going to get the Scooch Ball with a little video series for that. I'm going to throw in something that I call the Terrain Fitness workout series. So there are 30 20-minute workouts to use your Cooch Ball and Scooch Ball literally from head to toe. So we have one for gut health. A lot of people don't realize constipation is often tied, the root is pelvic floor tightness.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got gut health. I've got a whole sequence on breast health. We have the gua sha for the face with the Cooch Ball. So that's going to be in there. I'm going to shoot this new bonus with those 10 juicy exercises for getting your pelvic floor healthy.
Tuned up.
And so, so this bundle is special for your community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're
So I'm excited. Before, when I had Jana on, we had done a private masterclass for our membership group and a Girlfriend Doctor Club. And there was the best love episode. And it just that piece of empowerment. Look, I thought I just had to live with this, or I thought surgery was my only option, or, I've been using a pessary for so long, or I've been dealing with incontinence. And there's so much to it when it comes to the pelvic floor that would want you to have this information. And it's not, your doctors don't know this information for the most part. Pelvic floor specialists, it's called specialist for a reason. It's a specialty within the pelvic floor. As a gynecologist working in urogynecology and these other aspects, there's so much to it. So I want you guys to check this out. So go to drjana.com/pelvic floor and check out the pelvic floor empowerment series, the empowerment bundle that we've got there for you. And as always, because your voice matters to me, your questions, your comments, your stories, all of that's important to me and helps me guide the content that I bring to you here on the Girlfriend Doctor Show. So please keep commenting. Send us a message to our customer service team at drjanacabeca.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. Check out everything that Jana's offering today at drjana.com/pelvic floor. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Jana.
Thank you, Dr. Anna.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Girlfriend Doctor podcast. Check out all the links below for more.